Hello, everyone. I'm Harpreet Singh, welcoming you to the Future of Work Pioneers podcast. Today, we are speaking with John Murabito, the Executive Vice President and CHRO of Cigna. He leads Cigna's HR and services organization and also oversees the Cigna Foundation. John serves on the boards of the Human Resource Policy Association and the American Health Policy Institute. He is the chair of the board and a fellow of the National Academy of Human Resources. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Harpreet. Nice to be here.
So, John, you've had an impressive career. Tell us about your background and any defining moments that led you to pursue a career in HR.
Yeah, well, it's first off, it's been a long career. So I've been doing it for, I've been in HR for almost 40 years now. So quite a while. I've been at Cigna for 17 years in the head of HR job. And before that, I was at Monsanto as the head of HR at Monsanto. And then prior to that, I was at Pepsi, or Frito-Lay division of PepsiCo for a while. But in terms of what got me into HR, it actually goes way back. When I was in college, in the summers in between college and then before I went to graduate school, I worked in the steel mills in Chicago and as my summer jobs. And I kind of got interested in like union and management relations just by observation of the situation. And that's kind of what led me into, is there actually a career that one could make in this type of work? And so I was an economics major in college, and then decided to just go right into grad school and get a labor relations degree, and that's kind of what led me into it. My early career was more on the labor side, union relations side, and then that eventually led into more, I'd say mainstream and HR leadership positions. So that's I would say that was kind of an early defining thing that drove me into this function.
You worked for other companies like Monsanto, for example. How is the HR function different in healthcare when you think of other industries?
Yeah, well, in a couple of ways. I think in one way, in healthcare largely being a service type organization, or an organization that that is based off, it's a service industry, obviously very different from manufacturing, like when I was at Monsanto or Frito-Lay and so forth. So I think the first thing is, in whether it's healthcare or financial services, for example, but I think in any kind of a service industry, your people end up being essentially your product. And so, I think from an HR standpoint, if you can affect the intellect, the overall kind of intellect of your organization, and the engagement or the heart. So I like to think of Cigna as a head and heart organization. And if you can affect those from an HR standpoint, I think you have a winning combination. It's a little different than in manufacturing, where things outside of your control to some degree are certainly part of the overall success equation, like the weather or the price of product and so forth. So that's one thing. I guess the other thing, Harpreet, that I would say is in healthcare, I find the people, our employees, no matter what level we're at in the organization, people are extremely passionate about the mission of the organization, the good that we feel like we can do, the good that they feel like they can do, because, we're affecting people oftentimes at a really vulnerable state. And we have an opportunity to help in a really meaningful way. And that makes a big difference to this industry overall. And it's one of the reasons largely that once people get in it, they tend to stay.
The role of leadership in the current crisis has been critical. How do you see leadership when it comes to driving workforce transformation or dealing with the situation of crises?
Yeah, I think what we have found at Cigna, and it's been kind of my observation, three things have become really important, I think, from a leadership standpoint. One is authenticity. So I think, for whatever reason, in the kind of situation that we've been in a crisis situation, um, employees really want transparency and honesty from their leaders, almost more than anything else. And, they know that we don't know everything, but they'd love to hear us say that when we don't, and maybe, try to make an effort to get the answers that they're asking about. Um, I think we're in a lot of uncharted territory, and employees are in it as well. But they're looking to have these conversations with their leaders to, to really try to help the overall situation just by discussion and conversation. So I think authenticity is important. The other thing we've really found, and it's interesting because it's in a world where we can't come together, obviously, but visibility has become really important. So to me, I tell my folks just things like just reaching out to say hello, on non-business issues become incredibly important and motivating. Things like, as much as I personally dislike the fact of having a happy hour on a video, these kinds of things are important to people. Informal gatherings. We've also found more town halls, more senior leader get-togethers, more senior leader leadership calls, things like that. In the early parts of COVID, we were doing kind of weekly leadership calls with our top 500 people and getting almost 100% attendance every time. And we've continued to do them, not every week, but quite often. The last thing I would say, in addition to authenticity and visibility, is empathy. People really want to, they really want to understand that you get what they're going through. If they have kids at home, or they have elder care, or they have people sick, whatever the case might be, I think they're looking for their leaders more so than ever to be empathetic. And so I think it's really important. I've heard stories of a couple of companies and CEOs that, they've got all their people coming into the office. They've almost like ignored, that's maybe an exaggeration, but to some degree, almost ignored the situation that we're in. And boy, those are companies where engagement has dropped like a rock, because their employees just don't feel like their leadership actually gets what they're going through. So anyway, authenticity, visibility, and empathy are the three things that jump out.
So with the COVID-19, how did Cigna face the initial challenges of creating these distributed teams, having people in a different context altogether?
Yeah, well, we were a little bit lucky in that we already had about 40% of our workforce that was already work from home. So we had kind of embraced the work from home situation for a good number of our roles in the organization. So that was a good starting place for us. But very quickly, obviously, in mid-March of last year, we moved about 90% of the remaining employees to work from home within a couple of weeks. So it was a huge, quick lift, particularly by our technology organization, to get people with the ability to work from home. So we've had the vast majority of our company working from home for 10 months now. We launched a microsite on our intranet to make sure that people had a kind of one source of the truth for what's going on. we have a good physician population, obviously, in our company, and some that are extremely respected, within our organization. And so we've made great use of our very respected physicians in terms of communications to our employees. And especially early on, when we were getting so many different kind of, messages from the government and the news and so forth, our employees, they wanted to believe our physicians more than they did anybody other than maybe Dr. Fauci. And, so that's been great. We really had to acknowledge the the stress that our employees were under, like employees of many companies. Again, with kind of childcare situations or elder care, or all of a sudden, two people working at home with kids. I mean, it's been a challenge for so many. So, we did really embrace kind of flexibility and non-traditional hours and things of that nature. Managing, trying to get our managers to be more equipped to manage that type of a team. So that was kind of our initial, foray into the situation.
This episode is brought to you by Experfy. Incubated in Harvard Innovation Lab, Experfy provides custom future of work solutions, such as private talent clouds and skill taxonomies. Experfy differentiates itself by using subject matter experts to pre-vet and pipeline candidates for AI and high-end technology skills. However, Experfy Talent Cloud Platform is skill agnostic and can be licensed to build custom talent clouds for any and all skills. In a different use case, enterprises interested in employee intermobility can license the Experfy platform to create an internal gigs marketplace where interested employees can be algorithmically matched to projects, gamifying their learning experience. Visit www.experfy.com for more information.
And have you experienced perhaps an evolution in culture? How have you kind of grappled with the employee experience, technology needs, those kind of things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, COVID has really upended the way that we live and work and play and all those kind of things. And all of that has really, far-reaching impacts, not just today, but probably down the road as well. I can tell you, I'm somebody that in the first few months, I really disliked the words "new normal" because I kind of like refused to think that we were going to be in something brand new and different for the long term. But I've kind of come around, unfortunately, to some degree. Things are going to change, and what we left in March is probably not ever going to really exist anymore. That's not all bad necessarily either. I think the challenge is how do we really harness and embrace kind of what we've learned through COVID and play it to our advantage as a company, both from a competitive standpoint and a success standpoint, as well as, for our employees, in terms of how is it better for them. And I think it really can be. If you think about kind of where we could be headed with the flexibility that we have in place, the ability to work from home, the ability to be a hybrid employee, things of that nature, I think are a real plus. But, once we knew that it was not going to be a 1 or 2 month situation, we kind of brought our HR team together. We did a lot of surveying of our people. Developed a number of kind of support measures to help our employees, things like emergency time off, and we bought time off that people had purchased. We removed restrictions on things like unaccrued PTO. We enhanced our access to EAP service and promoted use of digital tools in that regard, including kind of behavioral tools that people could take advantage of, when there were stress and mental health issues. We did a employee assistance fund that was funded by the company and by our employees for folks in the organization that needed real help. We did a scholarship program. We did Cigna care cards for again, for people who needed real financial help, and gave them a little boost to help with things like childcare. So a lot of things like that. Technology, I mentioned in terms of how we really advanced our technology out in the home situation so that people could work from home, and we put in a lot of tools, collaboration tools, et cetera, that people could use. And then, in terms of managing our talent, we tried to give our managers, let's say a crash course almost on how they could manage in a remote workforce. So a lot of learning opportunities that they were able to use to adjust their skills. We moved away years ago from kind of traditional performance appraisals and so forth, and went to a check-in process. And we've really taken advantage of that whole kind of check-in situation and process, so that people really stayed close to their folks through that virtually. So, I guess I'll stop there, Harpreet. I mean, I could probably go on actually with what we've done for our folks to kind of change. And we've actually tried to, I'll just end because you started with culture. We have a very, very strong and kind of palpable culture at Cigna. It's why people stick here. And, we've tried hard to kind of maintain that in terms of our mission, but also now modify it with how we're trying to work in a different way.
Oh, that's all very admirable. So Cigna has proven to be a very progressive organization in combating systemic racism. Cigna started this initiative called Building Equity and Equality. Can you talk about how this started, and what are some of the important elements of this initiative?
Sure. So 2020 was, in large part, obviously about COVID, but with the death of George Floyd and other events that unfortunately went on, we felt like we had an opportunity to have a real and honest conversation about race relations in our country at our company. And so we took the opportunity to really have deep conversations, hundreds of them, with small groups of employees, to try to understand how our people were feeling through this situation, regardless of their own race, to understand, to learn, and just to let people talk, to some degree is kind of therapeutic, I guess. But we did hundreds of these and really learned to some degree how we could help beyond our own company and our own kind of company borders. And so that drove the, as you mentioned, the Building Equity and Equality program, which is really a 5-year program, is the way we've kind of thought about it, to accelerate our efforts to support DE&I in our communities of color, and recognizing that that racism and discrimination do in fact exist, and that they're more than just kind of human rights issues. They also are healthcare issues, and certainly drive disparate impact in healthcare. And we feel like we can really make an impact of that, particularly in the communities where we live and work and have customers. So we've done a whole number of things within the 5-year initiative. We launched a new product in partnership with Magic Johnson, actually, to support women and minority-owned businesses in Los Angeles. We partnered with Howard University and the Urban Superintendents Academy to support a pipeline for urban education leaders. We developed a community and individual engagement plan for health equity and equality among our customers in a bunch of our kind of key locations, and more. In particular, things around our diverse supplier spend, we're probably going to double in that time frame. So we've kind of approached it, or we try to approach it as not a moment, but a movement, with the idea that, I hate to say it, a lot of companies kind of will jump in for a short time while things are really going on. We felt like we're not going to just come in for a splash. We want to make an impact over time. And so, that was the whole idea about the program. And our CEO says often, he says, stop, listen, and understand. And that's how we started with the program, and how to learn how the things that we think will ultimately make a difference. So I'll stop there, Harpreet.
And out of these initiatives you mentioned, which of these you think is going to have the biggest impact, or you're most excited about?
The one I'm probably most excited about, I did not just mention, and that is the what we're doing from a food insecurity standpoint. So we have within the Building Equity and Equality program is also a focus on healthier kids. And we have a program called Healthier Kids for Our Future, where we're supplying through all kinds of different means food. And we were doing it largely through schools, and we're still doing it some through schools, but also now directly into the homes of the underserved who could use help. And obviously, we're all reading these days, unfortunately, about the issues with food insecurity in the country, and we're trying to make an impact with what we're putting into food insecurity. To me, that's actually the biggest thing we can do.
That's wonderful. Let's switch gears. Building the future of work would require a shift in how we do education in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And you've stated that you're a big believer in liberal arts education. What do you think the future of education looks like?
Yeah, well, I went to a liberal arts college undergrad. I happen to be chair of the board of trustees of that college now. It's a small college in Illinois called Augustana, and so I take a particular interest in education, and it clearly, I think, things are going to change in terms of how employers consider education, how they consider the types of people that they want to hire. But I think at the end of the day, what will continue to be really critical are things like critical thinking, in addition to, let's call it the more narrow skills, for lack of a better description, or specific skills, whether that be accounting or engineering or actuarial science or what have you. Those types of things are really important, obviously, for preparation. But I think companies will continue to want people who are critical thinkers, who understand the world, who understand change, and how they apply what they know to the problems of today to build better solutions. And so I think the challenge of kind of higher education turns out to be, how you make sure that you're giving young people or people in general who are seeking education kind of that variety of skills, and at the same time, kind of preparing them for their next chapter, so to speak, in the workplace. Probably a lot of other things are going to change too, with employers thinking about things like certificates instead of degrees, or coursework that people are going to get in a lot of different ways that it will be given. I think as an employer, we're delivering learning, in many different ways today, even than what we did at the beginning of COVID. I think education becomes, a big opportunity, both in the workplace as well as, before people come in the workplace. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you raise an important point here about how degrees may be supplanted by certifications. E&Y announced last year that they were not kind of waiving this requirement for a bachelor's degree to be considered for employment. You see that kind of a change coming to Fortune 500s in the U.S.?
I think I don't know that it's going to become ubiquitous that will be the case. I don't predict the end of college and university degrees as we know them. I think there's still a big place for that. But there probably are a lot of jobs where a full college education may not, or a full degree as we know it today, may not be really necessary. And people can move into a vocation, without a degree, but more with specific training. But that doesn't mean that our higher education institutions can't provide that type of thing as well. So they're going to have to be flexible in terms of how they think about what they supply, and for many students, it could be that a degree is still the right way to go. For others, it could be that maybe they don't need a full degree, but they need a more concentrated education in a particular area.
So having discussed education, let's talk about the workforce of the future. What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the key word, and I don't have the corner on this knowledge because we're all talking about it in my HR world, but I mean, flexibility is what it's likely to be all about. I think that the challenge becomes how we really optimize employees to be at their best, how we engage them in how they can be at their best and respect what they want to do, and then find a way that find the intersection of what works for us as a company and what works for them as an employee. And so you may have a lot of situations going forward where the majority of a non-manufacturing workforce, for example, could be a hybrid workforce, where it doesn't matter, so to speak, where people are located on a particular day, other than when there's a specific need to be in an office, where coming together to collaborate or share, makes a big difference to outcomes. And so, for us, I think we're going to end up with a relatively small population that comes into the office almost every day. That'll probably be more senior levels. And then, of course, there'll be a group that's probably continues to be at home all the time. And then a pretty sizable group that will be in the middle, where, they're going to be, they're going to use both. And so I think offices become more, sharing hubs, collaboration hubs, places where people come together for events rather than necessarily the everyday work. And, it's certainly going to change kind of the large headquarter type campuses, if not in square feet, certainly in the way that square feet is utilized. So I think technology becomes much more important as well, so that we're going to have to make sure we provide a seamless technology experience for folks also that, that probably we don't have quite the corner on today.
And another very interesting change that we're seeing is the rise of freelance talent. So, in the 80s and 90s, it was less than 10% in the US workforce. And today it's over 30%, and may end up being 50% in the next couple of years. So how do you see contingent talent fitting into corporate workforce?
Yeah, it will fit. I think the statistics are of, the statistics around freelance talent are a little bit overblown, because that includes like Uber drivers and, a lot of those independent service contractors that are not necessarily associated with a company, so to speak. But even when you back that group out, there's no question that we're moving in that direction. I think it's going to depend on the organization. Obviously, I think, the kind of gig workers, so to speak, will, there's going to be a place for them in some organizations more so than others. And, where you can come in and out for project work, probably going to see that more in technology than you will perhaps in other parts of a company. But I think it's a trend that will continue. But I'm not sure I'm necessarily in the camp of, that the gig employee is going to necessarily kind of take over, so to speak. I'm not quite as personally bullish on that trend as maybe some are.
What role does technology play in continuous learning and upskilling at Cigna?
Yeah. So, boy, technology is just becoming obviously more and more important to learning and upskilling in the environment that we're in. And I think even when we're, kind of into the whatever the next chapter turns out to be, I think it continues to be quite important. We were always kind of in a traditional learning management system with specific, kind of training courses that people could access. And earlier this year, we implemented a learning experience platform, which sounds a little bit like just words, but really it's a very different kind of way of learning, just because of the amount of things that we now have available for people to access has, just exponential growth in the amount of things that people have at their fingertips to learn from a lot of different places, all connected to their own learning plans and competencies and so forth, which that's always been the case for us. But now it's really a great expansion of how and what people might have access to, which is pretty cool. Just this ability to really draw on kind of a multitude of sources. The in-person learning for the time being is obviously, not being used at all. I think some of that will come back in certain situations, but it's I'd say the decline of in-person learning is pretty will continue to be pretty rapid, kind of, post COVID.
Any words of advice for HR leaders that are trying to grapple with the current realities and are trying to transform their HR function?
The thing I would always tell people, I've been doing this, like I said at the beginning, for 40 years, so quite some time. And my advice always has been, put the most talented team around you that you possibly can. Put people around you that are going to ask the tough questions and are going to be, kind of think differently and creatively about solutions. I would say the same thing today. I think the best HR leaders are the ones who they put a team together that is diverse, and not just in their backgrounds, but more importantly, frankly, in the way they think, in the way they come up with solutions, and the ideas they have to attack problems. Always start with a focus on the business and what we're trying to do to enable the business. But have leaders in your organization that are going to be willing to put the tough questions on the table and have good solutions to that could be kind of creative and different versus the same old tried and true things. At the end of the day, you can't beat smart, well-intentioned people who are focused on the business. I think that's what it's all about.
That's well said. John, it's been such a pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, you're welcome, Harpreet. I was glad to participate.